Dr. Thea Castellanos had always believed that her doctorate in xenobotany qualified her to handle unexpected plant life, but the carnivorous vine currently trying to drag her emergency shelter into its digestive pit was testing the limits of her academic preparation. She gripped her plasma cutter with hands that shook from 3 days of inadequate nutrition and increasing desperation, watching her only protection from Kepler 442b's hostile environment slowly disappear into what appeared to be a botanical stomach. "This is not in the field manual," she muttered, firing controlled bursts at the vine's thicker sections while trying to avoid hitting her shelter support cables. Aggressive flora, yes. Furniture-eating plants with digestive systems, apparently not worth mentioning. The vine released her shelter with what sounded distinctly like botanical annoyance, retreating into the undergrowth with the wounded dignity of a predator whose dinner had fought back. Thea's temporary victory felt hollow as she surveyed her situation: crashed shuttle, failing equipment, dwindling supplies, and an ecosystem that seemed personally offended by her presence. 3 days ago, she'd been Dr. Thea Castellanos, respected xenobotanist conducting routine sample collection on a supposedly uninhabited world. Now she was just Thea, stranded human attempting to survive in an environment that appeared to have been designed by someone with a cruel sense of humor and an advanced degree in hostile biology. Her emergency beacon sat on a nearby rock, its diagnostic display cycling through error messages in 17 languages, as if the device was trying to find new ways to inform her that it was completely useless. The crystalline formation surrounding the valley created an electromagnetic dead zone that blocked all communication attempts, turning her rescue beacon into an expensive paperweight with delusions of functionality. "Status report, beacon," she said to the device, knowing it couldn't respond but finding comfort in the familiar routine of equipment checks. "Still broken. Still stranded. Still surrounded by plants that view me as a potential snack. Excellent. Maintaining perfect consistency in our complete failure to contact civilization." The dual suns of Kepler 442b were beginning their descent toward the horizon, which meant the temperature would soon plummet from uncomfortably warm to potentially fatal, assuming the nocturnal predators didn't find her first. She'd learned to recognize the warning signs: unusual sounds in the undergrowth, changes in the local flora's behavior, and the particular quality of silence that preceded something large and hungry investigating her campsite. Her food synthesizer chose that moment to emit a sound like a dying mechanical wail, followed by a series of lights that definitely weren't in its operational manual. The device had been producing increasingly questionable nutrition bars for the past day, with flavors that suggested either advanced culinary experimentation or complete molecular breakdown. "Please don't die," she said to the synthesizer, giving it what she hoped was an encouraging pat. "You're literally my only source of food that isn't trying to eat me back. I know your warranty expired somewhere around the first digestive vine attack, but I'm asking for professional courtesy here." The synthesizer responded by producing a nutrition bar that glowed faintly green and smelled like regret mixed with artificial berry flavoring. Thea stared at it for a long moment, calculating whether starvation or potential food poisoning was the greater threat to her survival. "This is what happens when you wish for adventure," she told herself, taking a small, cautious bite of the glowing nutrition bar. It tasted like synthetic fruit that had been filtered through disappointment, but it didn't immediately cause her digestive system to stage a revolt, which counted as a victory under current circumstances. As darkness settled over the alien landscape, Thea activated her shelter's defensive perimeter, a collection of motion sensors and deterrent fields that were supposed to discourage nocturnal predators but mostly served to announce her location to anything curious about human technology. The shelter itself was a marvel of emergency engineering, designed to provide basic protection against most environmental hazards, though its designers had apparently never considered the possibility of carnivorous vines with architectural ambitions. Her portable scanner continued its passive monitoring routine, occasionally detecting energy signatures that suggested artificial technology somewhere in the surrounding wilderness. The readings were too faint and irregular to triangulate, but they represented the only evidence that she might not be completely alone on this world. Whether that was comforting or terrifying remained to be determined. Day 3 log, she said to her personal recorder, maintaining the research habits that had kept her sane through isolation. Shelter integrity holding at roughly 60% after repeated botanical assassination attempts. Food synthesizer producing edible products of questionable nutritional value and suspicious luminescence. Beacon remains comprehensively useless. Personal morale could be described as aggressively optimistic, assuming optimism can involve this much cursing at inanimate objects. She paused, listening to the alien sounds of Kepler 442b's nighttime ecosystem awakening around her shelter. Something large was moving through the forest, accompanied by smaller creatures that made chittering sounds like mechanical insects having philosophical debates. Additional note, she continued, local wildlife continues to demonstrate that evolution on this world favored creativity over conventional predator-prey relationships. I'm beginning to understand why this planet was classified as uninhabitable for permanent settlement. The motion sensors registered something approaching the perimeter, but the readings were inconsistent, sometimes showing a large single organism, sometimes multiple smaller ones, and occasionally nothing at all despite continued movement sounds. Thea checked her plasma cutter's charge level and tried to convince herself that whatever was out there was probably just curious rather than hungry. Through her shelter's transparent section, she could see the alien constellations that had become familiar landmarks during her 3 nights of involuntary camping. The brightest star in the local sky hung directly overhead, its blue-white light cutting through the atmospheric haze with unusual clarity. "You know what?" she said aloud, addressing the star as if it could hear her. "I'm a scientist. I believe in observable phenomena, testable hypotheses, and rational explanations for natural events. But right now, I'm desperate enough to try something completely unscientific." She looked up at the bright star, feeling foolish but no longer caring about dignity in the face of potential extinction. "If anyone or anything is listening, I could really use some help here. I'm not asking for a luxury rescue shuttle or 5-star accommodations. Just, someone. Anyone. Before this planet decides I'm more useful as fertilizer than as a visiting researcher." The words felt strange coming from someone who had built her career on empirical evidence and peer review, but isolation had a way of stripping away academic pretense and leaving only hope and human need. She stared at the star for several more minutes, half expecting the universe to respond with some kind of sign. Instead, she got the approaching sound of footsteps. Not the skittering, sliding, or chittering of local wildlife, but the distinctive rhythm of bipedal locomotion with a gait that suggested intelligence, purpose, and familiarity with walking upright. Footsteps that moved with the careful confidence of someone who knew how to navigate hostile terrain without becoming dinner for carnivorous plants. Human footsteps. Thea sat perfectly still in her shelter, hardly daring to breathe as the footsteps grew closer. Either she was experiencing hallucinations brought on by glowing nutrition bars and stress, or someone was actually approaching her campsite. Someone who walked like a human, moved like a human, and represented the first potential rescue she'd encountered since crash landing in this botanical nightmare. "Please be real," she whispered to the approaching footsteps. "Please don't be another fever dream brought on by questionable food synthesis and 3 days of talking to broken equipment." The footsteps stopped just outside her shelter's defensive perimeter, and a voice called out, "Definitely human, definitely real, and definitely the most beautiful sound she'd heard since her shuttle's distress beacon had started broadcasting its litany of technical failures." "Dr. Castellanos," the voice said, calm and professional with just a hint of amusement. "I don't suppose you're the xenobotanist who's been having an extended argument with my planetary security sensors for the past 3 days?" Marcus Rivera stood at the edge of Thea's defensive perimeter, studying her improvised campsite with the professional appreciation of someone who understood exactly how difficult it was to survive 3 days in Kepler 442b's hostile environment. Her shelter showed signs of creative engineering under pressure, her equipment arrangement demonstrated practical thinking despite obvious resource limitations, and the scorch marks around the perimeter told a story of aggressive flora that he recognized from his own early encounters with the local ecosystem. "Dr. Castellanos," he called again when no immediate response came from the shelter. "I'm Marcus Rivera, and I'm here to help. Also, I should probably mention that you're camped about 50 meters from a colony of acid spitters, which explains why you've been having trouble with the local plant life. The shelter's entrance flap opened cautiously, revealing a woman whose appearance suggested she'd been wrestling with hostile botany for several days and winning through sheer stubbornness rather than superior firepower. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that had seen better days. Her research jumpsuit bore the kind of stains that came from close encounters with alien plant fluids, and she was holding a plasma cutter with the grip of someone who'd learned to love her weapons through necessity. Marcus Rivera, she repeated, stepping out of her shelter with obvious relief tempered by scientific caution. As in, the survival specialist who's supposed to be conducting long-term adaptation research somewhere in this sector. That's me, Marcus confirmed, noting that she was handling the situation with impressive composure for someone who'd been stranded alone in one of the galaxy's more creative attempts at hostile environment design. Though I should point out that somewhere in this sector is a bit vague. I've been living here for 6 months, and this is definitely my backyard. Your backyard, Thea said, looking around the seemingly empty wilderness with new appreciation. Which means you've survived 6 months in an environment that's been trying to kill me for 3 days. Either you're incredibly lucky, or you know something about this place that wasn't in my mission briefing. Probably both, Marcus said, gesturing toward the forest around them. This world takes some getting used to, but once you understand the rules, it's actually quite manageable. Rule 1, everything here is either poisonous, carnivorous, or both. Rule 2, the things that aren't trying to eat you are usually trying to dissolve you. Rule 3, the acid spitters are territorial but predictable, so you can coexist with them if you respect their boundaries. Acid spitters? Thea asked, following his gaze toward a section of forest that looked identical to every other section of forest to her untrained eyes. Those crystalline formations you probably thought were pretty landscape features. They're actually colonies of organisms that spray concentrated acid at anything that gets too close. Very effective territorial markers, and probably why your beacon can't get a signal out. The crystal structures interfere with electromagnetic radiation. Thea stared at the formations she'd been admiring for their aesthetic beauty, suddenly understanding why her communication attempts had failed so completely. So I've been camping next to a community of acid-spitting territorial aliens while trying to contact rescue services through their natural jamming field. That's a fairly accurate summary, Marcus agreed. Though I should mention that they're not actually alien, they're indigenous to this world, which technically makes us the aliens. They were here first. Right, Thea said, her scientific training automatically filing this information for later analysis. Indigenous acid-spitting territorial organisms. That actually explains several things about my shelter's defensive system failures. Marcus studied her makeshift perimeter defenses, noting the clever adaptations she'd made to standard emergency equipment. You've done impressive work with limited resources. Most people wouldn't have lasted 3 days out here, especially not while maintaining this level of organization. Xenobotany training, Thea explained, gesturing toward her collection of samples and analysis equipment. You learn to expect plants that don't follow conventional rules. Though I'll admit the carnivorous vine that tried to eat my shelter this morning was a new experience. Digestive vine, Marcus corrected automatically. They're not technically carnivorous, they break down organic matter through enzymatic action and absorb the nutrients. Much more efficient than traditional predation, though the practical difference is minimal if you're the one being digested. Digestive vine, Thea repeated, adding the correction to her mental catalog. Good to know. Any other terminology updates I should be aware of before something else tries to eat me? Marcus laughed, the first genuinely relaxed sound Thea had heard since her shuttle crashed. There's a comprehensive field guide, but most of it comes down to avoid the things that glow, respect the things that make noise, and never trust anything that looks harmless. Words to live by, Thea agreed. Speaking of living, I don't suppose you have communication equipment that actually works. My beacon has been conducting an extended performance art piece about technological failure. I've got a full communication array at my base camp, Marcus said. But I should warn you that the nearest rescue ship is about 3 weeks out. Kepler 442b isn't exactly on the major shipping routes, and emergency extraction takes time to arrange. 3 weeks. Thea processed this information while watching Marcus scan her campsite with the practiced eye of someone who understood survival in hostile environments. 3 weeks of depending on someone she'd just met, 3 weeks of surviving in an ecosystem that seemed designed to challenge every assumption about planetary habitability. 3 weeks, she said finally. In an environment that's been trying to kill me for 3 days. I don't suppose your base camp has better defensive systems than emergency shelter and optimistic thinking? Significantly better, Marcus assured her. 6 months of preparation and adaptation tends to improve one's survival infrastructure. Plus, I've learned to work with the local ecosystem rather than against it. Work with it? The acid spitters, for example. They're excellent perimeter security if you know how to negotiate with them. The digestive vines can be convinced to focus their attention on specific areas, creating clear zones for human habitation. Even the nocturnal predators follow predictable patterns once you understand their territorial arrangements. Thea stared at him with the expression of someone whose worldview was undergoing rapid adjustment. You've turned a hostile alien ecosystem into a security system. More like a collaborative arrangement, Marcus said. I provide them with things they need, minerals from deeper in the valley, cultivation of their preferred prey species, removal of competing organisms. They provide me with protection and a relatively stable environment. That's. Thea paused, her scientific mind analyzing the implications. That's actually brilliant. You've created a symbiotic relationship with multiple species simultaneously. The ecological complexity alone must be fascinating. It's certainly never boring, Marcus agreed. Though I should mention that the learning curve can be steep. There have been some memorable mistakes along the way. Such as? Well, there was the incident with the luminescent fungi that I thought were decorative but turned out to be part of a complex communication network. Disturbing them sent what amounted to a panic signal across half the valley, and I spent 2 days explaining to very annoyed predators that I wasn't actually declaring war on the forest. Thea found herself laughing for the first time since her crash landing, tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying finally beginning to ease. How did you explain that to alien predators? Very carefully, with a lot of apologetic body language and strategic placement of their preferred food sources. Turns out that most territorial disputes can be resolved through proper etiquette and adequate compensation. Interspecies diplomacy through bribery, Thea said admiringly. I'm beginning to understand how you've survived 6 months in paradise. Paradise might be overstating it, Marcus said, but his tone suggested genuine affection for the hostile world around them. Though I'll admit it grows on you. Literally, in some cases, there's a symbiotic moss that's quite useful for wound treatment, though it does require you to let it establish a temporary colony on your skin. As they talked, Thea realized that her desperate wish upon an alien star had been answered in the most unexpected way possible. Instead of rescue from this world, she'd found someone who had learned to thrive in it, someone whose survival expertise complemented her scientific knowledge in ways that suggested their meeting might be more than simple chance. Marcus, she said, watching him efficiently disable her shelter's failing defensive systems with obvious familiarity with the technology, exactly how far is your base camp from here? About 2 hours on foot through safe routes, he replied. Though I should warn you that, safe is relative on this world. We'll be traveling through territory controlled by 3 different species, and at least one of them will want to inspect you personally before allowing passage. Inspect me? The crystalline entities near the river crossing. They're curious about new organisms, but they're generally benign as long as you let them run their scans without trying to run away. Running triggers their pursuit response, which tends to end badly for the runner. Thea looked around her improvised campsite, calculating the risks of staying versus the uncertainties of trusting a stranger in a hostile environment. The plasma cutter in her hands felt reassuring, but Marcus's confident knowledge of local conditions felt more reassuring. All right, she said finally. Lead the way to your base camp. But I reserve the right to second-guess every decision along the route. Wouldn't have it any other way, Marcus said with a grin that suggested he was looking forward to the company. Fair warning though, my base camp has some unusual features that take getting used to. More unusual than digestive vines and acid-spitting territorial organisms. Let's just say that symbiotic architecture has its own learning curve, Marcus said mysteriously, shouldering her emergency pack with practiced efficiency. Come on, Dr. Castellanos. Time to see what this world looks like when you're not fighting it every step of the way. Marcus's base camp defied every assumption Thea had made about survival shelters on hostile worlds. Instead of the reinforced bunker she'd expected, she found herself staring at what appeared to be a living building that had grown rather than been constructed. Organic walls curved gracefully between cultivated trees, bioluminescent vines provided gentle lighting, and the entire structure hummed with the kind of integrated ecosystem harmony that took years to develop. "This is your shelter?" she asked, watching a section of wall literally breathe as it regulated internal atmosphere. "It looks like someone convinced an entire forest to become architecture." "Symbiotic construction," Marcus explained, leading her toward an entrance that dilated open as they approached. "The local organisms were already building complex structures. I just convinced them to build one with human-compatible environmental controls. Took about 4 months to negotiate the specifications." Inside, the base camp was even more remarkable. Living walls maintained perfect temperature and humidity, organic furniture had grown to accommodate human proportions, and the lighting system responded to their presence by adjusting brightness and color temperature for optimal comfort. It was like living inside a benevolent organism that had been specifically designed for human habitation. "Marcus," Thea said, running her hand along a wall that felt warm and slightly yielding, like healthy skin, "this is the most sophisticated example of interspecies architectural collaboration I've ever seen. How did you even begin to communicate your needs to organisms that think in completely different spatial concepts?" "Very slowly, with a lot of trial and error," Marcus replied, activating a control surface that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. "Turns out that most organisms understand concepts like shelter, comfort, and mutual benefit once you find the right way to express them. The tricky part was explaining human environmental requirements without accidentally requesting something that would kill me." The communication array he'd mentioned occupied one wall, its biotechnological components seamlessly integrated with more conventional human equipment. Screens grew from organic substrates, and control interfaces responded to both touch and what appeared to be biochemical signals from the living building around them. "I can get a message out to the rescue services," Marcus said, beginning the communication sequence. "But as I mentioned, response time is going to be measured in weeks rather than days. This world isn't exactly a priority destination for emergency services." Thea watched him work, noting how his movements seemed perfectly synchronized with the living systems around him. He'd clearly developed an intuitive understanding of the symbiotic technology that went far beyond simple operator training. "How long did it take you to learn to work with all this?" she asked, studying a wall display that was definitely providing information but through patterns of color and texture rather than traditional text or graphics. "About 3 months to achieve basic competency," Marcus said, transmitting her rescue request. "Another 2 months to develop real fluency with the biological interfaces. The learning curve is steep, but once you understand the communication principles, it becomes natural." Communication principles. Most of these organisms respond to biochemical signals as much as physical manipulation. Intent, emotional state, even stress levels affect how they interpret your requests. It's like learning to speak with your entire nervous system instead of just your voice. Thea found herself fascinated by the implications. "So your survival strategy isn't just about adapting to the environment, you've integrated with it to create something new." "Exactly," Marcus said, settling into a chair that adjusted its shape to accommodate his posture. "Traditional survival methods treat hostile environments as problems to overcome. But this world taught me that collaboration is often more effective than conquest." The next few days fell into a routine that surprised Thea with its comfort and efficiency. Marcus's base camp provided safety and resources that made survival not just possible but almost pleasant, while her scientific expertise helped him understand aspects of the local ecosystem that he'd learned to work with without fully comprehending. The luminescent vines in the wall structure, she said, studying samples under her portable microscope, they're not just providing light. They're part of a complex chemical communication network that extends throughout the local ecosystem. Your building is essentially plugged into the forest's nervous system. That explains why I always seem to know when predators are approaching, Marcus said, watching her work with obvious interest. I thought I developed better intuition about local wildlife, but it's actually the building warning me through subsonic vibrations. More than that, Thea said excitedly, pointing to her readings. The chemical signatures suggest that your presence here has altered the local ecosystem's stress responses. The forest is calmer, more organized. You're not just living in symbiosis with individual organisms, you've become part of the area's ecological stability. Their partnership developed naturally as they combined his practical knowledge with her scientific analysis. Marcus taught her to read the subtle signs that indicated safe passage through different territories, while Thea's understanding of plant biochemistry helped him optimize the symbiotic relationships that kept his base camp functioning. The acid spitters near the river, she said after a morning spent studying their territorial behaviors, their aggression patterns are linked to mineral deficiencies in their diet. If we supplement their territory with the right trace elements, we could expand the safe transit zone significantly. And reduce the need for the elaborate diplomatic rituals I've been performing every time I need to cross their territory, Marcus said appreciatively. Though I'll miss the ceremonial stone arrangements. There's something oddly meditative about negotiating with aliens through interpretive rock sculpture. The humor between them felt natural, developing from shared challenges and mutual appreciation for each other's expertise. Thea found herself looking forward to their daily equipment maintenance sessions, where Marcus's practical experience combined with her theoretical knowledge to solve problems neither could have addressed alone. Your water purification system, she observed, examining the biomechanical filters that process the local water supply, it's not just removing contaminants. It's adding biochemical signals that make the output compatible with human physiology and acceptable to the local organisms. You've created water that satisfies both human health requirements and interspecies diplomatic protocols. Diplomatic protocols? Marcus asked. The local ecosystem monitors chemical signatures in shared water sources. By adding the right molecular markers, your filtered water identifies you as a benign presence rather than an invasive species. It's like a biochemical passport. As days passed, Thea began to understand why Marcus had thrived in an environment that had nearly killed her within hours. His approach to survival went beyond mere adaptation. He'd created a lifestyle that was sustainable, comfortable, and surprisingly fulfilling. More importantly, their partnership was proving more effective than either of their individual efforts had been. Marcus, she said one evening as they monitored the forest's nocturnal activity through the base camp sensory network, I need to ask you something that might sound strange. After 6 months of negotiating with alien ecosystems through biochemical diplomacy, I'm pretty much immune to strange questions, he replied. When the rescue ship arrives, what are your plans? Are you planning to complete your research assignment here, or return to Earth? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the displays that showed the peaceful rhythms of their adopted ecosystem. I was supposed to spend 2 years here testing long-term human adaptation strategies. But honestly, I've learned more in the past week working with you than I did in the previous 6 months working alone. That's mutual, Thea said. My 3 days of desperate survival taught me more about hostile environment adaptation than years of theoretical study. But working with you has shown me possibilities I never considered. Possibilities? For sustainable human presence in environments that were previously considered uninhabitable. Your symbiotic approach could revolutionize how we establish colonies on hostile worlds. But it would require long-term study, extensive documentation, and probably years of additional research. Years of research, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. In an environment that's finally starting to feel like home, with a partner whose expertise complements mine perfectly. Is that a hypothetical observation, Thea asked, or are you thinking what I'm thinking? That depends, Marcus said with a smile that had become increasingly familiar over their days together. Are you thinking that when the rescue ship arrives, we should tell them we're not ready to be rescued? I'm thinking, Thea said, settling into her chair with the satisfaction of someone who had found exactly what she hadn't known she was looking for, that I made a wish upon a star for survival, and the universe gave me something much better. Which was? A partner, she said simply. Someone who makes the impossible feel not just survivable, but worth surviving for. Outside their living shelter, the alien forest hummed with contentment, its bioluminescent displays painting gentle patterns on the organic walls while two humans discover that sometimes the answer to survival prayers comes in forms too perfect to have been mere coincidence. The rescue ship arrived on a morning when the dual suns painted Kepler 442b's sky in shades of amber and rose, and Thea found herself experiencing the peculiar sensation of being rescued from a situation she no longer wanted to escape. Captain Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the base camp's biocommunication array with professional efficiency and barely concealed confusion about the circumstances she'd found upon arrival. Dr. Castellanos, this is Captain Chen aboard the CSC Meridian. We're here for emergency extraction, but I'm getting some unusual readings from your location. Are you secure and ready for immediate pickup? Thea exchanged a look with Marcus, who was monitoring the rescue ship's approach through sensors that translated electromagnetic signatures into patterns of bioluminescent display across their living walls. They'd spent the past 3 weeks preparing for this moment, but now that it had arrived, the prospect of leaving felt like abandoning everything they'd built together. Captain Chen, Thea replied, this is Dr. Castellanos. I'm secure and in good health, but there are some complications we need to discuss before any extraction procedures. Complications? Captain Chen's voice carried the particular tone of someone whose rescue mission was developing unexpected variables. Are you being held against your will? Is there a hostile presence preventing safe extraction? Not hostile, Thea said, watching Marcus struggle to suppress laughter at the captain's assumption. More like, collaborative. I'm going to need to speak with Mission Command about extending my research assignment. The silence that followed suggested Captain Chen was consulting her orders and finding them insufficient for the current situation. Dar. Castellanos, according to my briefing, you were stranded on an uninhabitable world following shuttle malfunction. Are you reporting that Kepler 442b is actually suitable for human habitation? Captain, I'm reporting that Kepler 442b is suitable for human habitation provided you have the right approach, the right expertise, and the right partner, Thea said, her hand finding Marcus's with the automatic ease that had developed over their weeks together. I'm also reporting that my research here has potential implications for colonial expansion that weren't apparent before my extended field study. Extended field study? Captain Chen's voice was beginning to show signs of strain. Dr. Castellanos, you were supposed to be conducting a routine sample collection mission. Are you telling me that being stranded for 3 weeks constitutes legitimate research? Marcus activated the external communication array, his voice joining the conversation with calm professionalism. Captain Chen, this is Marcus Rivera, survival specialist assigned to long-term adaptation research on Kepler 442b. Dr. Castellanos has been collaborating with me on breakthrough developments in symbiotic environmental integration. Mr. Rivera, Captain Chen said, and Thea could practically hear her consulting additional files, your research assignment was supposed to last 2 years with minimal outside contact. Are you reporting successful completion of your mission parameters? I'm reporting that my mission parameters were inadequate to address the actual possibilities presented by this environment, Marcus replied. Dr. Castellanos' expertise in xenobotany has enabled advances in symbiotic technology that could revolutionize human expansion into previously uninhabitable environments. Symbiotic technology. Captain Chen's voice suggested someone whose straightforward rescue mission was rapidly evolving into something requiring significantly more paperwork. Are you both requesting extended assignment duration? We're requesting recognition that what we've developed here represents a fundamental breakthrough in hostile environment colonization, Thea said. And yes, we're requesting extended assignment duration to properly document and expand our research. The rescue ship's proximity allowed for real-time communication, which meant Captain Chen's exasperated sigh came through clearly. Dr. Castellanos, Mr. Rivera, I'm going to need to speak with both of you in person to understand what exactly you're proposing. Prepare for shuttle landing in your immediate area. Marcus began the communication sequence that would guide the shuttle to their landing coordinates, a process that involved consulting with 3 different local species about temporarily expanding the safe transit zone. Thea watched him work, marveling at how natural the interspecies negotiation had become for him. Think she's going to understand what we've accomplished here? Thea asked, watching the rescue shuttle navigate between territorial markers that looked like decorative crystal formations but were actually sophisticated biological warning systems. I think she's going to think we've both suffered some form of isolation-induced psychological break, Marcus said with amusement. Right up until she sees the base camp and realizes that everything we're telling her is actually conservative understatement. Captain Chen's first words upon seeing Marcus's symbiotic base camp were unprintable in 3 languages, followed by what appeared to be a complete recalibration of her understanding of human technological possibilities. She walked through the living structure with the expression of someone whose reality was undergoing rapid adjustment, occasionally reaching out to touch walls that responded to her presence with gentle bioluminescent acknowledgement. This is impossible, she said finally, settling into a chair that adjusted its configuration to optimize her comfort. According to every environmental assessment I've read, this world is supposed to be aggressively hostile to human presence. It is, Marcus agreed. Unless you approach it as a collaboration rather than a conquest. The local ecosystem is incredibly sophisticated, it just operates according to principles that human technology traditionally ignores. Principles such as biochemical communication, symbiotic resource sharing, and territorial negotiation based on mutual benefit rather than dominance, Thea explained, activating a wall display that showed the complex network of relationships that kept their base camp functioning. Marcus didn't conquer this environment, he joined it. Captain Chen studied the organic technology surrounding them, her expression shifting from confusion to professional fascination. The implications for colonial expansion are exactly why we need to continue this research, Marcus said. What we've developed here could make dozens of previously uninhabitable worlds accessible to human settlement. But only if we can document the process, refine the techniques, and train others to implement similar approaches. How long would such research require? Thea and Marcus exchanged another look, their silent communication refined by weeks of partnership in challenging circumstances. Realistically, 2 to 3 years for comprehensive documentation and technique refinement. Possibly longer if we expand into other environmental zones on this world. And you're both willing to remain here for that duration? Captain, Thea said, looking around the living space that had become more of a home than anywhere she'd lived on Earth. 3 weeks ago I was stranded, desperate, and convinced I was going to die alone on a hostile world. Now I'm part of the most successful human-alien collaboration in history, working with a partner whose expertise complements mine perfectly, and living in a place that's taught me what sustainable human expansion into space could actually look like. In other words, Marcus added with the humor that had sustained them through their most challenging days, we're not ready to be rescued. We're ready to build something unprecedented. Captain Chen was quiet for several minutes, studying reports that had probably not prepared her for discovering that her rescue mission had evolved into a first contact success story. I'll need to consult with Mission Command, but preliminary assessment suggests your research has potential strategic value that outweighs standard rescue protocols. Translation? Thea asked. Translation, I think you've both found something extraordinary here, and I think Command is going to want you to keep finding it, Captain Chen said. Though I reserve the right to check on you periodically to ensure you haven't been absorbed by sentient architecture or converted into plant food. Fair enough, Marcus said. Though I should warn you that the local ecosystem has developed definite opinions about visitors. You'll need to be properly introduced before future visits. 6 months later, Thea stood in the same spot where she'd once made a desperate wish upon an alien star, but now she was watching that star through the transparent walls of a research station that had grown rather than been built. Her emergency had become an opportunity, her survival story had become a love story, and her wish for rescue had become the foundation for humanity's most successful symbiotic colony. "Status report," Marcus said, settling beside her with 2 cups of coffee brewed from beans that had been grown in symbiotic partnership with local soil organisms. "Research station expanding ahead of schedule, interspecies diplomatic relations stable, and personal satisfaction levels consistently exceeding all reasonable expectations," Thea replied, accepting her coffee and savoring both its familiar warmth and the alien spices that the local ecosystem had contributed to its flavor profile. "Any regrets about not being rescued when you had the chance?" Thea looked around their expanded base camp, where human technology and alien biology had merged into something entirely new, where their partnership had grown from desperate cooperation into something that made the universe feel less vast and more welcoming. "Only one," she said finally. "Which is?" "I regret not wishing upon that star sooner," she said, leaning against his shoulder while alien constellations painted familiar patterns across unfamiliar skies. "Though I suppose the universe has its own timing for delivering exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it." "Especially then," Marcus agreed, and they sat together in comfortable silence, 2 humans who had found in each other the answer to prayers they hadn't known they were making.